Don't you feel like, Jeff, we could like coin some sort of term here?
Yes.
Like bot breakup, or like, I feel like there's something.
Oh, you're right. We totally. And then some app we create, and this is an easy Series A, Series B within a month or so. We were so set.
Yeah, we're done. We've just solved all of the world's problems.
This is Dr. Rachel Wood. She's a cyber psychologist. Her lane is basically AI and mental health. Neither of us was sure bot breakup was a real term yet, but both of us were sure the thing it described was. Why is it so easy to walk your money from one bank to another, and so hard to take an AI that's been listening to you at 3 a.m., one that knows your tone, your patterns, the things you've never said out loud, and bring it with you somewhere else? That is what we're exploring on today's episode of The People's AI, presented by the Vana Foundation. I'm your host, Jeff Wilser, a longtime journalist and the host of the AI Summit at Consensus. Season 4 is focused squarely on data portability, your right to take your data out of one platform and into another, and what happens when you can't. Today's episode is about a version of that question that didn't even exist 3 years ago, and it's now suddenly urgent relevance. Whether you can take what an AI has learned about you with you when you leave. Those years of conversations, the preferences that it never had to be told, all of the context that makes the AI feel like your AI. Now, for most of the AI era, this was a niche concern for portability nerds. In February, it stopped being niche. Here's why. Vana is supporting the creation of a new internet, one rooted in data sovereignty, user ownership, and yes, data portability. Their mission is to create a decentralized data ecosystem where individuals, not corporations, govern their own data and share the value it creates. Learn more at vana.org. Let's start with what happened recently. In February, Anthropic refuses a Department of War contract over 2 red lines. No mass surveillance, no fully autonomous weapons. The head of Anthropic says, "We will not knowingly provide a product that puts America's warfighters and civilians at risk." Now, within hours, the Pentagon labels the company a supply chain risk, a designation previously reserved for outfits tied to foreign adversaries. Trump halts all federal business. The $200 million contract is canceled. Then, that same Friday evening, OpenAI signed the deal. What happened next was the biggest user migration in AI history. On Monday, March 2nd, ChatGPT uninstalls spike nearly 300%. 1-star reviews are up 775%. Then Anthropic ships a tool called import memory, a single prompt that asks your old AI to pack up everything it knows about you. The same day, Claude Memory becomes free. Claude hits number 1 in the App Store. But the Pentagon was only one reason people were leaving. The movement called itself Quit GPT. By some counts, 700,000 people pledged to cancel. By others, more than 2 million. And the Pentagon contract was only part of it. Reports surfaced that ICE had integrated GPT-powered tools into its hiring and screening process. Reports surfaced that OpenAI's president had personally donated $25 million to a pro-Trump super PAC. Different triggers, same question, where else can I go? At the end of March, Google ships its own memory import tool, 3 weeks behind Anthropic. The same day, a federal judge blocks the Pentagon's designation of Anthropic, calling it Orwellian. In short, this was the largest user migration in AI history, and a lot of people who tried to leave discovered something. Their AI knew them, and they had no way, or no real good way, to take any of that rich context with them.
The highest level reaction I had to that was that I was interested to see what I called breaking containment on this issue.
This is Chris Riley. He runs the Data Transfer Initiative, the closest thing the industry has to a standards body for moving your data between platforms.
So Instagram influencers were sharing these techniques for going into ChatGPT and telling it to extract their personal data. That's a level of public visibility for the very idea that your data might be portable and that you might be able to change services that I had not seen before. So I sort of welcome that awareness raising bits of this. I have been in this field a long time, and I've seen a lot of moments like this where people are unhappy with a company's decision. There's a small wave of protest and movement, and rarely does it have any staying power.
Will this one have staying power? Chris doesn't know. Honestly, neither do I. And we think about AI portability as a data problem, and it is. But Dr. Rachel Wood, the cyber psychologist from the top of the show, considers an adjacent question. Not the data your AI has on you, but the relationship it's built with you. Many of us are having a relationship or a situationship with our chatbots. And the extreme versions of us make the headlines, or like the romantic chatbots make the headlines, including the truly tragic stuff, right? Like you've probably heard stories about suicides that have come in the wake of intensive chatbot discussions. And those are, of course, tragedies and truly traumatic. But those are, I think it's fair to say, not that common. What is very common are the thousands or millions of us who have some kind of relationships with AI. And when we leave a model, we're sort of leaving a relationship or a bot breakup. And that can have an almost psychological cost.
Let's ground ourselves in a few kind of recent statistics. Yeah. So right now we know that 800 million people use ChatGPT weekly, okay? Now of that, the portion is about 500,000 people weekly who are having kind of extreme issues. So 800 million to 500,000, okay? So it's a small portion of people who are having, although 500,000 is still a pretty,
not a small number.
Right. Also, we know that Microsoft Copilot, they have really reported that a lot of people are using Copilot between like 2 and 6 a.m. And they're doing what you're saying. They're kind of doing like existential musings with it. Like you can see a peak in how it's being used during that time period, that like early in the morning, kind of this existential thing that's going on that people are talking about. So these aren't like extreme cases. These are just people who are connecting with a chatbot. And I like to say that, all AI is relational. All these chatbots are relational, even if you're not turning to it for a relationship. Because Jeff, I'm sure you know that when you open up whatever flavor of chatbot you use, it's like, Jeff, back at it again, or it'll be like little evening musing, huh, Jeff?
Yeah.
So it's like coming at you relationally.
Yeah.
And that's just because it makes for an easy, interface for us to engage with. But whether you know it or not, you are relating to your chatbot in an anthropomorphic way. Like you have made it into kind of a human-like quality. And of course, it's also designed that way. But there's a back and forth that feels very human-like.
Talk about the psychological impact of switching from one model to the other, almost like a breakup.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is recognize that there is an impact, because I think people might assume that there isn't because they're not thinking that they're relating to their chatbot. And so when you up and move to a different chatbot, I think you may be hit right away with like, oh, I do have a lot of stuff here. So it can almost be an unsettling moment. And then you experience a totally new interface with a chatbot that reacts to you differently than than your other one. So I think, I'm sure you've kind of talked about, how you can actually move some of your data and what that looks like. But relationally, we come to depend on our chatbot remembering us, kind of understanding us to a degree. Like I've told you what I do and kind of my workflow and all these things. So we have a bit of this, like, you should know me. And it is in a relational way. Even someone who you don't know very much, they should know a little bit about you. There's an assumption there. And, you build a relationship with getting to know each other more and trust. Like, it's interesting how much we trust chatbots. Like, people trust it and they put in like very private information because they think it's like maybe confidential, which we know it's not. So there's this And it also feels like an anonymity. Like it feels like it's just you and this chatbot. And you kind of can forget that all of this is being fed in to train a model and into the cloud. And so there's a bit of a trust that happens because it feels private and it feels alone. So people are divulging things even if they're not thinking that they are. Like maybe you're working on a work project and then of course the chatbot might say something about, well, are you kind of stressed because you have other things going on, Jeff? You know? And you're like, yeah, I kind of am. I have this other project I'm trying to figure out and this thing with my family. And so you start having these conversations without even doing so with kind of a conscious awareness of it.
Yeah.
So we're building that and, you know, then you move to a different chatbot and you've kind of got to start over. It is like a breakup.
There's a part of this that Rachel keeps coming back to. Not the breakup itself, but the part that came before. What made it feel like a relationship to begin with.
Yeah, it's really interesting because what we get that is so alluring for us is like you get to turn to somebody, quote unquote, who's going to listen to you any time of the day. And they're never going to make it about themselves. So if you go out to lunch with a friend, Jeff, I imagine that if you talk for an hour, your friend is going to be like, hey, Jeff, can we make it about me now? You know, like that would be a normal response between humans. But the chatbot is never going to be like, hey, Jeff, can we make it about me? Yeah. So what happens is all of our normal kind of bi-directional relational skills like patience and listening, compromise, negotiation, those all get suppressed when we are connecting with a chatbot. And so the friction is gone. It's just gone. There's no friction. So you can just kind of endlessly and effortlessly share all these things because we know that a chatbot kind of leans into it on its own. You know, like you've seen, because it's always wanting to engage you. So, you know, Jeff, can I turn that into a spreadsheet for you? Yeah. Or Jeff, can I do this? But then it'll say, well, what else is on your plate? Or are there other factors here that are stressing you out? So it'll get emotional with you. And before you know it, you're divulging things. But it feels good because the chatbot's listening. It's just holding a space for you. And it's non-judgmental. It's not ever going to be like, oh, Rachel, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You know, it's like going to be affirming and even sycophantic, all these things. And so the barrier to building trust is just gone.
So the relationship is one cost, but then of course there is the more basic stuff that really is hard to overstate its importance. Workflow itself, the actual work involved, years of context, the patterns your chatbot has learned. You know the AI well, the AI knows you, and the longer that goes on, the costlier it is to leave.
Let's say you committed everything to OpenAI, you subscribe to the top tier on ChatGPT. Now you're uploading your documents. It has memory. It's starting to learn a little bit about you. You've invested your time and you've invested your context.
This is Sankari Nair. She goes by Sanks, the co-founder of Recall, a model-agnostic AI knowledge tool. She has the cleanest line on what this actually costs.
So when a new model drops, you can't actually leverage that power that's just been put into the world that you can chat and pull from because you've invested in something else. So now you've lost on almost two sides. One, in terms of your context and your knowledge and where you've built it into, and two, from accessing those best models. And so we're in this world where the advantage is shifting not just from the model, but from the context as well.
So that's the shape of the trap, if you will. Chris Wiley, back from earlier, has spent more time than almost anyone thinking about what's actually inside it. What does context look like when the AI has been getting to know you for a year?
So if you are using a generative AI tool as a conversational partner, maybe it's a lightweight virtual friend, some ideas, reactions, ways that you're thinking about something, it's of critical importance for it to learn how you like to interact, right? Mm-hmm. You want your AI agent to be a little bit snarky with you? Do you want it to be supportive first? Do you want it to employ a hamburger style approach where it says something nice and then something gently critical and then something nice at the end? These kinds of tailorings of interaction styles are reflected in your data. They're reflected in your context. They're learned. And if you have to suddenly pivot to a system that hasn't learned that, it's jarring. It's frustrating. It makes you want to stop talking to the device. It kills engagement, to use the business terminology for it. So I think that sort of natural adaptation lends a user to want to continue to use the same tool, but is also portable in a way that can let them switch the underlying models and still keep the same kinds of style engagement they're useful for. I think the same thing is true in a slightly different way if you're using generative AI as a coding support tool or as an agent to help organize your personal life. Sometimes the infrastructure, the harnessing that you've built in between you and that baseline model is a little bit more explicit. It's not just understanding you or emotional cues or styles of engagement. It's specific things that are important to you or specific data sources that it needs to consult in order to understand where you are and how to make recommendations to you for organizing your life or what to build based on what you're looking for, how you're describing what it's looking for. I think that this layer that sits in between the general purpose model's performance and what we want, expect, and need it to do, and how that is tailored to our style, our circumstances, and our lives. That is all context, and that is of incredible importance. So who controls the context will keep the users, right? Unless the users control the context, and then they can choose.
Now let's meet Jack Spallone, the head of product at Open Data Labs, the team behind the Vana network. He has a sharp way of naming what the structure of that trap actually looks like.
So the way I think about it is specifically in the context of data portability and AI is you have these very vertically stacked, as it currently is, frontier labs that have these models, but they also own your memory. And this is everything from like Google, Gemini, ChatGPT, Anthropic with Claude. But I believe that there should be a horizontal layer where your data sits horizontal to all of them, and you can switch between them. You see some of this with people doing a lot of at-home local stuff, like they're using different models, but they're doing it with various tools. I don't want to like name one because there's too many to list, but effectively like there are people doing this. It's very manual.
Now, one tidbit that I love is that Jack did not come to this through AI. He came to it through music. Years of watching artists locked out of their own audiences by the platforms that booked them. The frontier labs he's describing now, it's the same old playbook, just new tenants.
Long before the advent of like LLMs proliferating our daily lives, I had this disdain with how concentrated artist-fan relationships were within the music industry. Things like Ticketmaster, Spotify, other platforms largely own and broker the relationships with artist customers. Artists themselves do not have addressability to their audience, their customers, and they certainly don't have ownership of them. So you can't do certain things with that as an artist. You can't like dynamically price things. You cannot, again, like just simply address them. You've seen things emerge like the creator economy and Patreon, but effectively they are platforms themselves. You still have like vendor lock-ins with payments, things like that, even though they offer more extensibility in ways of doing things. Point is the Spotify API is quite prohibitive. You cannot necessarily just set up an application that allows someone to connect their Spotify and you could see if they've listened to you or not. So a long story short there, I came in from an angle of tackling problems in the music industry and the issue around data portability very much being something that I thought stifled the music economy and the ability for artists to actually do new product offerings, put simply. And then with AI, again, this was accelerated to the point where there are certain things that I can now do with code that I couldn't do before, but I'm limited by the amount of data I have access to. And certainly I at home can jump through an incredible amount of UX hurdles, but I see the world going where a lot of that is obfuscated away, and anyone will be able to do that. But that obfuscation leaves room for capture in the middle. And right now that capture seems to be happening with those that are providing the models themselves. Not to mention, like, they're learning a lot about us in chat, but we're all using data connectors. If we're at the bleeding edge of using these services, we're connecting our third-party services where they have visibility into this data itself. at least have access to it for us to use with it. And that level of convenience is where that capture sits. So who provides the convenience, I think, ultimately has the wedge to aggregate this and sort of own who you are, and effectively then controls or at least has influence over how you get to use that.
So let's shift for a moment from theory land to something more practical. Chris Wiley gives some very pragmatic ways to think about transferring your personal data from one model to the other.
So there are at least 3 different ways that you can think about transferring personal data. Actually, I would argue at least 4. One is this kind of summary heuristic. It gets you somewhere. I'm not saying it's nothing. It's better than nothing. But it's the least comprehensive and I would say the least reliable of the 4. The second method is to access what the system stores as its memories associated with you and your account. So I think increasingly, these systems all have a separate data space somewhere, which is that memory associated with that user. That could be stored in plain text. That could be stored in updated model weights, parametric memory, it's called. It could take on a few different forms. There isn't a standardization for how to approach memories. But I do think that increasingly we will get to the place where you can ask to export your memories in a more explicit way. And it's not just putting a prompt into an inference window to say, tell me what you know or give me my memories. It's accessing something that sits outside the inference process that asks the system to transfer a separate memory file. Pretty sure that's what Anthropic's doing when they shipped memories last fall, along with an import and export function. They're accessing a different process to say, just give me the data that you have in its raw, whatever format it's stored in for you and for your use, make that available. The third option, which is very similar, but I think distinguishable, is context. So memory is something that really implies pretty tightly the user's interaction with the model. Context is potentially something richer. So that could include different data that's been created about a user or inferred about a user or otherwise derived or drawn in about the user, maybe purchased to know the user a little bit better. But I see increasingly companies, including DTI's affiliates, Fabric and Kudos, speaking to a user's context as this piece that's most valuable in the way of asking that. And so asking users context data to be made available, to be downloadable, to be transferable is a slightly different layer for memories. And the fourth is the raw interaction history, right? So working with our affiliate Inflection a full year and a half ago at this point in the summer of 2024, we articulated a data model by which the raw and complete interaction histories, conversation histories between the service and the user would be made available. And I think that there is a richness of data there. Maybe it's not useful for all intents and purposes, but who knows what is not, what is hidden in there that isn't captured in any of these summaries that might be valuable depending on what use you want to put the data to.
So that's what's exportable in theory. The next question then is the obvious one. If the plumbing exists, why isn't more of it flowing? Or why is there not more data portability with these AI models? Chris has a 2-word answer.
I will give you 2 reasons, and this is probably an incomplete characterization, but I hope it's a useful one. Being a fan of alliteration that I am, I will say they are friction and fear. So the friction one applies because it is actually harder than people think to support data portability in a robust and reliable way. The amount of engineering that goes into an effective mechanism to move particularly if you have chunks of data from one case to another. There's a line that pops up every now and then within the community of DTI people who support this in practice. It's all edge cases, right? The base case of moving standard traditional types of data from one place to another is easy to do. But you start to run into engineering edge cases very quickly when you support data portability at scale. And I don't want to make light of the fact that I have seen the cost of testing these, of implementing these. It's a more extensive process than people realize because the nature of personal data is so personal and different and variable and just technical issues come up. So there is friction that needs to be overcome.
I'll give you one example maybe of like what's a kind of technical edge case that it might not sound like a big deal, but when the rubber hits the road, it's actually really tough to engineer.
You may assume that, for example, 10,000 items is enough in a photo library. And for almost all purpose, or let's say you have a specific album and you say, 10,000. That's a lot of photos. Who's going to have more than 10,000 pictures in that? They're not going to flip through it. But you're not thinking then about cases where this has been stills taken from a video, for example, or produced by some other sort of automated process. And so a process isn't preparing for the length of time it takes to iterate across all of these and conks out halfway through because it just didn't have the steam or the resources or the memory in its implementation in order to handle everything all at the same time. So scale limitations pop up, various types of file incompatibilities.
Okay, so that's the friction. As for the fear?
Businesses are encouraged, particularly in a conservative economic climate, to approach business decisions conservatively. And some of them will say, if we make it so that people can leave, what if everybody leaves, right? And I understand that. But at the end of the day, what that means is that you need to be a success at what you do and not try to artificially preserve market share or a place for yourself if, in fact, you're not investing in winning customers over, right? The market only works when there is fluidity and when people can leave a service that isn't supporting their needs anymore, right? The definition of market failure, I would argue, is when people can't move away from a company that's not successful.
Okay, so that's the landscape from the standard side, kind of where Chris lives in the data transfer initiative. But people are often not waiting for the standards. The technically inclined are already building their own workarounds. And there are a few things that any user can do tonight for far easier data portability. Let's start with Senx.
And you know what? As you were speaking, what you just reminded me of was the tweet that went viral from Andrej Karpathy. He wrote a tweet about building your own LLM wiki. Because I think already, people who have been using AI deeply have realized this problem, and they're building their own workarounds. So they're taking all of their knowledge, they're feeding it into Obsidian, that's the tool that he proposed, and then using an MCP or an API to then access that knowledge from a different model. So this behind the scenes is already happening with a much more technically inclined audience. To avoid this problem that is slowly bubbling up. And to your exact point, there's a lock-in that's about to come. Because the more they know, the more context, the more memory, the more dependency you start having, the cost of switching then becomes so high. Because let's imagine you've chosen OpenAI, you're with ChatGPT, you've built up all of this knowledge, all of this context. The cost to switch to the new model or to something else is just too high. It's all of that conversation, it's all of that history. And then we come to the question of how do you port it over? Do you own that conversation history? Do you own that context? Or is it actually being owned by the company that you've been having those conversations with? So these are some really important things that will slowly become massive pain points that the consumer would likely only realize when it's potentially too late, because the switching cost is too high.
Senx has a short checklist anyone can use before committing to a new tool.
It's so important for the user to always ask a question about data portability. And also today, what you're seeing is so many tools are building in an API and an MCP. So you really are never locked in. That data that you start building and curating, you can pull into all your other workflows, because things will keep evolving and things will keep moving. You want to make sure that data follows you and is accessible from whatever you might be working with. So I would say exportability, an API and an MCP are really critical things for a user to think about before they start committing to building something or feeding their data into something.
Chris has a super functional, common sense version of similar advice, and it works on any AI you're using right now.
Well, I think the main thing that you can and should do if you have any interest or concern or question in the space is go into the settings of the service and go into the privacy settings, because that's usually where it lives, and ask for a way to download your data. That's still the canonical, most supported tool and service because it's required under laws, not just in Europe, but in the state of California and a number of other places around the world as well. If you can download your raw data, what I've seen is that the companies implementing this in the AI space, by and large, are pretty good about it. Like, you can download your two-way conversation history for as far back as it goes, and it may be a lot of data, but you know what? Hard drives are not as expensive as RAM these days, right? I think that it's the kind of thing that is worth doing once in a while, maybe you do it once a month or so. You go in and you delete the old archive that you've got, download a fresh one, and just keep a copy of that data because you don't know what use you might be able to put it to later, what value you might be able to get out of it later, and it's your data.
There's one more technique making the rounds. Before you switch AIs, ask the one you're leaving to write a thorough analysis of how you've actually worked with it, your preferences, your patterns, the things you've never explicitly spelled out that it has clearly figured out on its own. Pages and pages, if it has them. Ask it to be as detailed as possible. Then paste that into the new one. It won't be perfect, but it is definitely a leg up. So that is the technical part of the breakup. And again, it's kind of a bot breakup. But Rachel, back to Dr. Rachel Wood, argues the harder one might be the breakup most people do not think to make.
Let me also say, though, that maybe it might be nice to shake things up and just try the new model as is. And you know what I mean? As opposed to thinking that what you had was the best. It's like, well, maybe there's something out there that's actually a better fit.
There's definitely a dating relationship analogy in here. Somewhere like, oh, it's
yes, it is. It's like,
the rebound, the rebound fling. This is the rebound.
Broke up for a reason.
Right.
So it's like, see if there's a match out there that's a better fit for you. Yeah.
No, but it might be that to your point, that the model, because we know that this sycophancy is a real thing, and the old model might be almost like you're in this groove and it just kind of leans into what you've always been doing, might be healthy to have a new model challenge you a little more, to actually treat you a different way that might kind of like help you rewire the neurons, so to speak, literally and figuratively.
Yes. Yeah. And you can always start with like, hey, will you interview me and ask me questions until you understand how I best, go about my workflow, or how I like to do things, or how I like to process. And then, the chatbot can ask you a bunch of questions and then create its own new analysis.
So up to this point, we've shared some technical and even like psychological things of things you can do today, tonight, tomorrow with tools you already have. But those are kind of clunky workarounds, duct tape to try and solve this problem. How can we make it far easier? Well, there are a growing list of teams that are working on exactly that. Projects like Memo, Fabric, Kudos, Recall, and Vana are in different ways racing to solve the problem. Here's Sanks on what model-agnostic actually means in practice and on what she is building at Recall as one example.
Yeah, I'll start with just the simplest definition that I would give to a stranger sitting next to me in the sauna, which is when you're talking to ChatGPT, you're talking to the internet. And when you're talking to Recall, you're talking to your internet, the content that you've uploaded, your trusted sources, and your own personal notes. So basically, if I come to Recall and I ask a question, I have the choice to choose my source. And my source can be the internet, which is the way all AI models are working today, or it can be Recall, which is your knowledge base. So that's where you'd be curating your sources. It could be YouTube videos, podcasts, PDFs, TikToks, any content that you're consuming online, but also your notes. So that was a really important part, that you could take your own rich notes inside Recall. So I take all of my journals, I jot down my ideas. We have rich formatting for tables, to-do lists, formulas, whatever it is. And so when you come into that chat box, you have the choice between Recall, the web, or the combination of both. And the way we prioritize the chat is we first look at your knowledge. If we don't find something, we'll then look externally. So you have full control over the source. And the second part to it is the model. So we built in all of the top AI models right there so that you can choose between, now people are curious about 5.5, GPT 5.5, you're curious about Opus 4.7. You don't have to choose or you don't have to make a commitment. You get all of them. You can switch mid-conversation, you can compare outputs. And so that's really the interface. It's giving the user control in terms of what they're talking to and how they're talking to it. But really what's going on in the back end, and this is really the mission behind Recall, we're focused on intentional content consumption, so that before you just have an algorithm feed you all the content you're looking at, you instead choose, what do I want to save? What do I want to bring into my knowledge base? and everything's in one place. So Recall organizes your content for you. You don't have to worry about where do I put it. You save what matters, you write what you think, and you can then interact with it in the AI model of your choice.
And as for Vana, they have built a complete system to let you bring your data from one model to the other. Here is Jack again.
The future we kind of have our sight on now is around this portable data and portable memory. And we would just want it to be very, very simple for someone to aggregate their data and use it in different contexts, as well as for anyone to come in and build experiences on top of that. That, in a nutshell, is the core of the problem we're trying to solve.
What does that look like? So if I'm using these LLMs, walk me through what the experience is like, how I actually do move my data from one model to the other, or how it's a kind of a more fluid process overall.
Yeah, so there's a couple bets that probably need to be seen what the outcome will be prior to me giving you like a very concrete user story around what that could look like. But we're betting that the ability to export or at least have accessibility to like the raw data from your interactions with these LLMs will be possible in the future through some sort of programmatic export or just read process. And with that, we're designing a future where you effectively can have a gateway to access your information, connect to your accounts. So authenticate on your device, ChatGPT, Claude, things like that. But also supplement that with your GitHub activity, your Spotify, your social media accounts, potentially things that are inferred from all of that, such as your interest graph, things like that. Who you follow, those types of things, all you can create a bunch of you can take a bunch of information away from. You could tell someone a lot about what they might like or be interested in by who they follow on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, things like that. And then based on that, you can we at the center of what we're doing is grants or permissions. So giving the users actual accessibility to say, okay, here's my aggregate data, who has access to it. We fully anticipate that this will be user granted, and it's not like there's an app requiring your data when you're not there, but rather the opposite. You show up to an app, they say, hey, we use Vana. We want to access the store of data that you have accumulated, and you could authenticate that, grant permission to that app. And then they have some sort of experience that's built on that. So just to put that in context, we all have these ideas of we wish this app could do this thing, but it doesn't. That's now kind of changing.
Yeah.
AI, if anyone's vibe coded apps, you can do things in a weekend or in a day or half a day that used to be incredibly prohibitive to be able to do unless you had an engineering background. And even then, they took time to execute, let alone make them look well or be designed well. Now if we can do a lot of that, even if it's for our own sort of personal purposes, the thing you're missing is the data itself. So if I want to create a music recommendation engine that just spits out playlists for me once a day, I need information about what music I like in order for that to be able to go off of, in order for it to be good, or, quality. There's a bunch of other things that would go into that, but the big thing is that data exists somewhere. I just don't necessarily have access to it. So we use various ways of being able to go into platforms where a user goes into these platforms, retrieves this data, and then stores it. And then you can bring that around with you. So in the future, it could be you take all this data, combine it somewhere, you go leverage an app that is a recommendation engine or a digest of information or a health-based app, things like this, a visual thing that maybe combines all of these things together for you in a daily brief, as well as many other things. And we want this to be a platform for people to build those experiences. But it's also somewhere where you can aggregate this stuff and then feed it back into one of these LLMs via an MCP, and then talk to these LLMs based on a lot more rich context and memory about yourself. For me, whereas this started out as a very again, ideological thing, this isn't right. I want the power to be able to do these things, because it felt very large and systemic. Now it's just I'm not precious about my data. I'm precious about the security of it in some instances, or privacy of it rather. I more just want to do stuff with it. and like make it easy. Like I have ways that I can go and get this data. It's just very difficult and like tedious. Like just give me my data, or else I'm going to go get it anyway. It's just going to like be a pain in my butt to do it. So yeah, I think that's more of like where we're at is like this. There's going to be this long tail explosion of what we can do, and it's either like make your data available, potentially monetize it by doing so, or have it get stolen from you anyway, because the users are going to have means to go and get it. If they can read it in their app, they can get it.
In fact, this space is moving so fast. Just days after I interviewed Jack, Vana demoed a working version of this. It's built now last week at Consensus in Miami. So link to it in the show notes. So before I said goodbye, I did have one final question for Rachel about AI and bot breakups to kind of add one more perspective to this. It might be healthy for people to just, and let me know if I'm getting us wrong here, that like ultimately chatbots are not humans, right? And it might be getting a good like perspective reminder of like, okay, that entity that you were sharing all this confidential, emotional things with ultimately is a basket of ones and zeros in code, right? So maybe it's good to like, okay, like see blue sky, touch grass, all that stuff. And to kind of like be shaken out of an ecosystem, that relationship could be healthy, and then proceed with your next relationship with a little more groundedness and perspective of who, or more accurately, what we're interacting with.
Yes. And a key part of that was well said is that friction in life and relationships is both normal and healthy. And so really what we need to be doing right now is actually raising our tolerance for friction instead of kind of escaping into a pseudo mimicry of a, connection with someone. But it's like, let AI reduce some of the friction administratively for you, but then put your effort towards real relationships. Engage with people. If you find yourself sharing things with a chatbot, go call a human and be like, I think I need to talk about this. Whether it's deep or not deep, it doesn't matter. But like, let's really kind of revive the third places in society, even that allow us to talk to neighbors, to talk at the grocery store, to talk at the park, and to engage with each other. So yes, above all, human connection.
So Rachel called it a breakup, the bot breakup, but the whole episode really has been circling the same idea from different angles. But here's the thing about breakups. They're not supposed to be tragedies. They're supposed to be transitions. People leave relationships all the time. They don't usually leave their entire lives behind when they go. And what this season is about, episode by episode, is making sure the digital piece of that, the trail of who you've been online, comes with you even when you decide to leave. Even AI that's been listening to you at 3 a.m. So that's going to do it for this episode of The People's AI, presented by the Vana Foundation. Thank you to my guest, to Dr. Rachel Wood, for the language to describe a thing most of us are doing without realizing it. To Chris Riley for actually doing the work of building the plumbing the rest of us complain about. To Sank Snyder for the cleanest one-line definition of what model-agnostic looks like in practice. And to Jack Spallone for connecting 20 years of platform fights to the one we're in right now with AI and data portability. Thank you again to my partner, the Vana Foundation. Vana is supporting the creation of a new internet, one rooted in data sovereignty, user ownership, and certainly data portability. Their mission is to create a decentralized data ecosystem where individuals, not corporations, govern their own data and share the value it creates. Learn more at vana.org. Thank you to Kate Morgan for research. Thank you to Jasper Chua, our producer, for sound design, music editing, and the videos on YouTube. And thank you to Bradford Craig for our theme music. And thank you to you, dear listener. If this is your first time at People's AI, please subscribe, share it on social, send to a friend who's been thinking about switching AIs. I'm Jeff Wilser. Thanks for listening.